Okay, so we did the African National Congress, and this is our Prezi. Our essential question is, does the South African government of today still have the apartheid system in its roots, and has it changed the identity of a black person?
Okay, so for my first slide, I'm going to be telling you guys about what the African National Congress is and how it formed, and don't read all that because I know you want to. I'll just explain it to you. So in the 1650s, Dutch farmers called Boers came to South Africa just for more farmland, and immediately they enslaved black native South Africans. About a century later, the British came to South Africa, and they wanted the gold and the diamonds infested in the landmines again in South Africa, and immediately again they enslaved the native black South African population. So eventually the Boers and the British had to find a government that worked for each of them, and in 1910 they created the Union of South Africa. And this consisted of an only white male parliament, and the only blacks and people of mixed races called coloreds were allowed to vote in the Cape Colony, which is a part of South Africa. We'll show you in a map later. And again, that privilege was taken away after a while. So the non-majority white population of South Africa had a problem with this Union of South Africa. So they created the South African Native National Congress in 1912, which advocated for non-white voters' rights. And in 1923, they changed their name to the African National Congress, and their goals to get voters' rights for non-whites still stays the same to this day.
So this is the Red Cape Colony. Like Piper said, in this area is the only place where blacks and coloreds, as they were called, were able to vote. But in 1936, the ability for the black person to vote was taken away, and then in 1953, the ability for the colored person to vote was taken away completely. So that was just for a short amount of time that they were able to vote there. And then this is about the ANC during apartheid. So the African National Congress during apartheid was kind of like, it didn't really do much, honestly. Like it was, so the Afrikaners, it was like a platform for the Afrikaners, and in 1948 the total segregation was put into place. And then so now anyone, so basically it was just whites and then anyone else. So that's kind of how it was in America too. And then, so the common places were created in 1959. 10 black homelands were created where a bunch of black families were pushed in to live there. That's kind of like one of the places that Johannes lived. And so those obviously weren't great, and then they were also getting destroyed. And so honestly, just the African National Congress wasn't doing anything, so then it just shut down, and then the anti-apartheid rebellions still continued to grow.
Okay, so this is how the ANC ended apartheid. And although the ANC was technically banned in the 1960s, the rebellion only continued to grow. And then by simply protesting and breaking the law, the blacks were arrested and put into prison. These uprisings made international news. And upon hearing of the brutality, private corporations and investors began to pull their businesses away from South Africa. There was little patience towards the highly anticipated inclusion of blacks in the government, and not just in South Africa, but in Western governments too. Finally, under high political pressure, F.W. de Klerk released the ban of the ANC, and the leader of the ANC, which is currently Nelson Mandela, was released from prison.
Not currly, not right now,
well,
but until
yeah.
2013. Okay.
Now we have a trailer of Nelson Mandela's life.
Okay, let's hook up the speakers.
Guys, the system in here is
Okay, so this is a slide about the comparison of racial equality before and after apartheid. And so after the fall of apartheid, the country became a multiracial democracy, and the country's first black president, which was Nelson Mandela, was elected. And during the time of apartheid, to be black was considered you were considered underprivileged, while to be white, it was a privilege. And during the African American Civil Rights Movement, which happened from 1954 to 1968, blacks were not allowed to be seen in public with whites, and they couldn't like drink out of the same water fountains and go to the same schools, as we know from Kafirboy. And so there was the 1960 Sharpeville massacre, and that helped push apartheid into the news, which then inspired more U.S. civil rights leaders to rise to action, and then such motivation of the civil rights leaders motivated Nelson Mandela to be more active in the quest of equality for South Africa. And in 1989, a big movement swept across South Africa, and public restrooms were desegregated, and many ANC activists were freed, marking the change of equality for the years to come.
The African National Congress currently, the current president of the ANC is Jacob Zuma. He marked the 20-year mark for the end of the apartheid. In 2012, the ANC force was facing corruption. So then,
So Katie was basically saying that the apartheid system is still in South Africa's roots. There is still blacks uprising and rebellion because they can't get the same jobs. Actually, in 2009, the pay difference between white and blacks continued to grow to not become equal, and there just keeps it's not really quite there yet. So the question we asked is, why do people keep putting leaders at the African National Congress into power when there really hasn't been much progress? And the answer to that is because grandmas and parents, they tell their children and their grandchildren, the only reason you're here today and the only reason you have dignity and the rights that you do have is because of Nelson Mandela and his part with the African National Congress. And even though we haven't gotten to where we want to go quite yet, if you keep believing in it, eventually we will reach racial equality. And so, how has the identity of the black person changed, going back to our central question? The answer to that is, I think from Western culture points of view, and we look down, or we look on in South Africa, we would say that they're getting there, they're pretty close, they're almost to racial equality. But I think we were to travel to South Africa, we'd say, I think the older generation of blacks still feels inferior to the whites, but the younger generation is starting to challenge the whites, and really the younger generation is trying to reach racial equality. So it's almost there, but not quite there yet. Thank you.